There is something you are doing right now that feels like healing, but it is not. You tell the story of what happened to you over and over, to friends, to therapists, to yourself at 3 in the morning, and each time you tell it, you feel relief, like you are finally being heard. But here is what you are not noticing. The story never changes, and you never move forward. That is not an accident. Some part of you needs the story to stay exactly the way it is, because as long as it does, you're not the one who has to change. This is not about people who suffered. Suffering is real, and it deserves to be taken seriously. This is about what happens after, when the wound stops healing on purpose, because healing means the story has to end. This isn't random. Psychologist Julian Rotter named it back in 1966, locus of control. Some people believe they steer their own life. Others believe something outside of them always will. Nietzsche saw the same divide a century earlier and gave it a darker name. He called it slave morality, a way of thinking where weakness gets reframed as virtue and the person who hurt you becomes the only reason your life looks the way it does. It's not conscious. Nobody wakes up and decides to build an identity out of being harmed. It happens slowly, in the space where explanation used to be, because the alternative is harder. The alternative is looking at your life and asking, what part of this is actually on me? That question has no comfort in it. The victim's story does. It gives you a villain, an audience, and an excuse all at once. And once you have all three, moving forward stops being necessary. You already have a role. You already have a script. But here is what Nietzsche understood that most people miss. This framework doesn't just explain the past. It becomes a prison for the future. Because now every decision you make gets filtered through it. Every relationship gets measured by it. Every risk gets rejected before you even try. Because the story has already written the ending. You have given away the only power you actually have. The power to change it. Let me tell you about a man, not a famous man, not someone with a visible wound, just a regular person. He was hurt by his father, not violently, worse than that. Neglected, ignored, made to feel like he wasn't worth the time. And for years he didn't know what to do with that pain. But then, slowly, he found a use for it. He started telling people about it, in conversations, sure, but also in his choices. When he failed at something, he would say, well, my father never believed in me anyway. What did you expect? When he didn't pursue a dream, he had the answer ready. My childhood made me this way. The story was always there, always available, and each time he told it, something interesting happened. People felt sorry for him. They validated him. They took his side against an absent father who had hurt him years ago, and that validation felt like the closest thing he had to love. So he kept the wound open, deliberately, unconsciously maybe, but deliberately. He would find new evidence for it constantly. A friend didn't call, his father's fault. See how people abandon me. He failed at a project, his father's fault. See how I'm broken? He stayed single, his father's fault. See how I can't trust anyone? The story explained everything. It answered every question before he even had to ask it. And the best part? It meant he never had to take responsibility for any of it. Years passed, 20 years, 30 years, and this man was still telling the same story. The details got sharper, the emotional delivery more practiced, but the core remained unchanged. I am broken because I was broken. People around him started to get tired, not because they didn't believe him, they did, but because nothing ever changed. The story never progressed. He never moved forward. He just kept circling the same wound, making sure it never healed. Because if it healed, the story would end, and without the story, he didn't know who he was. Most people would rather keep the wound than face that silence. And the cruelest part? His father, the villain in this story, had moved on years ago. He barely thought about his son anymore. But this man, decades later, was still arranging his entire life around the memory of that neglect. He was still giving that absent father power. He was still letting that old man write the script. Here is the part nobody wants to say out loud. Staying the victim is easier than becoming responsible. If you were wronged, you don't have to change. You don't have to risk failing on your own terms, because failure was already assigned to someone else a long time ago. Every time something goes wrong now, the story already has an answer ready. It happened before you even asked the question. That's not weakness in the way people usually mean it. It's a kind of protection, a very expensive one. Because the story only works if the wound stays open. The moment it closes, the explanation runs out, and you're left standing in your own life with nothing left to blame. Think about what that would mean. If the wound closed, then what? If you couldn't blame your past, you would have to look at your present, at your choices, at the ways you have, slowly and unconsciously, continued the harm that was done to you, not to yourself, but to others, to the people around you who are tired of hearing the same story, the same explanation, the same refusal to change. You stay the person it happened to. Most people would rather keep the wound than face that truth. Here's what the story costs, quietly, over years. Every decision filtered through what was done to you. Every relationship measured by whether it repeats the original harm. Every new possibility shrunk down to fit inside an old explanation. The wound doesn't just explain the past anymore. It starts writing the future too. And the tragedy isn't that something bad happened. The tragedy is that it keeps happening. Not because someone keeps hurting you, but because you keep arranging your life to confirm that the harm was real. You keep choosing people who will abandon you because that's the story. You keep failing at things because that's the script. You keep staying small because staying small proves the point. Nietzsche called this the greatest trick of slave morality. It makes you the author of your own suffering, but it lets you blame someone else for writing it. The wound becomes a prophecy. It becomes a prison you carry inside yourself. And here is what almost nobody asks. What if you're not actually a victim anymore? What if you were victimized once, years ago, but what you're doing now, keeping the wound open, repeating the story, refusing to move forward? What if that part is a choice, not a conscious choice, not one you would admit to, but a choice nonetheless? Because the alternative, accepting that it happened, grieving it, and then moving forward anyway, that requires a different kind of strength. That requires becoming someone new. And most people would rather stay broken than become someone unbroken, because broken is at least familiar. This isn't a call to forgive quickly, or to pretend the harm didn't happen. That kind of forced positivity is its own trap. It's a smaller, harder question. What would you have to become if the wound stopped defining you? Not the memory, the identity built around it. Most people never ask that question because the answer is frightening. It means there's no one left to blame for what happens next. It means you have to become responsible. It means you have to become powerful. And that's terrifying because power means you can fail. You can choose wrong. You can hurt people yourself. But here is what Nietzsche understood. You become strong not by escaping what happened to you, but by refusing to let it be the final word. He called it Amor Fati, loving your fate, not because it was fair, because it is yours and nobody else is going to carry it for you. The moment you stop asking the universe to apologize, the moment you stop waiting for your father, or your abuser, or your tragedy to suddenly take it all back and make it right, that is when you get your power back. This is not about being tough or pretending to be fine. This is about asking yourself, am I still hurt, or am I still performing being hurt? Because there is a difference. And if you recognize yourself in this video, if some part of you knows that you have been keeping a wound open on purpose, that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. You found a way to survive, and you kept it long past the point when you needed it. But survival and living are not the same thing. This channel exists for people who are ready to ask that question. If that's you, subscribe. If you're not ready yet, that's fine too, but come back when you are. Because the world needs people who have survived their own stories, not people still trapped inside them.